Danky, Saturday evening DFS slate. I am awaiting the official tweet that I may retweet said tweet and we may fully engage our audience. It is a Sunday. The best thing I can say about today's slate is that it is a Sunday. Weekends and especially Sundays have been very, very profitable this year. If we look at percentage profitability, off the top of my head, just looking at the tweets that come in, talking to people in the premium Slack chat at awesemo.com, it does seem that Saturdays and Sundays do tend to be extremely profitable. This having, I think, a non-zero amount to do with the fact that a significant number of the real pros, the grinders, the studs, if you will, in the daily fantasy community really aren't engaged in the NBA on Sundays with NFL around. I don't know if that's big enough news to, increase investment on, or if that's particularly actionable news, nor do I think that the sample size of, 7 Sundays into the NBA season at this point is particularly notable. So that may be absolutely nothing, but it does make some sense to me when you look at a number of very players who play a significant amount of volume and they're all of a sudden absent instead of firing 150, usually above average lineups into all the tournament pools. It's not surprising for me that they would pick up and be a little bit more profitable. Speaking of profitability and investment as a whole, there's an interesting colloquy on Twitter yesterday about some of my comments in increasing your exposure. All I was saying is that bankroll management is a frequent topic of discussion among everyone who plays DFS, from scrubs to pros and all levels in between. And one of the things I frequently hear that I disagree with is that you should be really consistent with the amounts you bet. That isn't to mean that you shouldn't have a baseline, which is X percentage of your, your bankroll. So let's say you have, $2,000 in the bank to play with that you've earmarked for DFS, throwing out $100 a day or 5% of that seems like a pretty good baseline for me. But almost all competitive betting / wagering industries, one of the main parts of advantage, if not in some cases the sole advantage, is varying your bet when you have more or less information or when you feel your situation is particularly strong or weak. So I disagree with the frequently espoused advice that you should basically bet the same amount every day and not really vary it, except for when your bankroll significantly increases. So if you've got that $2,000 in a bank and you're betting 5% of that, and you're betting your $100 a day, and then you take down $10,000 in a GPP, okay, then you can increase that to $500 a day. People would say maintaining that 5% level of exposure. I think that is losing an edge, which would be betting more when you feel better for whatever the reasons are. Obviously, overlay is the most obvious example, but beyond that, just late-breaking news to which you feel you have a particularly excellent read on. For example, yesterday we got the news on Kyle Lowry fairly late. You added some overlay in the form of people still having Lowry shares they didn't change in time, and I said make Kawhi Leonard a priority, and he went out and gave you 55 at pretty low ownership, and that made a lot of money for several people, including the person whose comment on the subject started. But he, basically I think said added 150% to his exposure, so he had been playing $200 and instead played $500, which seems like a not out of realm increase, and did extremely well for himself, and that makes a guy's month. So I do think that that's important advice, which I'm happy to discuss fairly well. So let's see. YouTube chat, she is here and up and running. The premium Slack chat is here and up and running. Someone in the YouTube chat says, look at the last 2 times these teams played: Embiid 50, Gasol 50, and Conley 50. I'm going to look that up just because I'm pretty sure you're wrong. I think Conley had 50. I'm pretty sure I'm beating Gasol in a game that went to overtime. I'm almost sure we're both disappointing in the best games against each other they've ever had. We did just get the news that Marc Gasol is in, which is going to make my want of exposure to that game much lower than it would have been if we managed to lose Marc Gasol. I'm going to download the results of that game because I'm pretty sure whoever said that is cracked and no doubt making an honest mistake. But that was not my impression of that game. So where are we looking? Let's take a look at that. November 10th of this year, so a little bit more than 3 weeks ago. Game did go to overtime. Even in overtime, Memphis won 112 to 106, so 218, not a ton of points. I had 204 points collectively in regulation. Joel Embiid had 44 on DK, 41 on FanDuel in 39 minutes. It is a very bad matchup for him. Ben Simmons had also 44 on DK, 39 on FanDuel, and that was by far his best game of his career in the 3 shots he's had at the Grizzlies, and a lot of that was aided by overtime. Conley had 54 on FanDuel, so that's pretty close to 50. And Gasol, better than I might have thought, 48.5, 46.5 on the 2 sites. So, and again, if I'm playing Gasol or Embiid today, I'm probably playing Gasol. The ownership's going to be similar, if not lower. You are saving some money, even though his price has obviously gotten higher than I think many of us saw Gasol's price getting this year. But he's been very, very good, even in difficult matchups. Yeah, so we let's use that, having done a little game theory, having done a little chat curation, and go ahead and jump into that first of our 4 games. This is one of 2 6 o'clock games. We have 2 6 o'clock games, 2 7 o'clock games. So we are going to have news coming in right up until lock on all these games. And there's quite a bit up in the air. Basically, half of Dallas is questionable, and so we're going to want to be want to have our head on a swivel there and be able to make some moves. And again, as far as your exposure goes, shout out Phoenix Suns. Not only are you incredibly bad at player news reporting, just because he says he wants to play, maybe, let Devin Booker recover a little bit. I think he could be good if you'd stop running him out there on one leg. That's some free advice. So, Memphis going into Philadelphia, 213 over-under. Basically, we have 2 6 p.m. games, both of which are kind of ass. 2 7 p.m. games, which are much better, especially the Clippers and Mavs game. I do think ends up being the one that I would have most interested in were I only able to pick one game here. This game is a bit ugly. It sets up very nicely for Mike Conley. This is legitimately a good Mike Conley spot. Philadelphia has shown a real issue dealing with guards of his ilk. He was good, obviously, in this game earlier this year, but also very good against them last year in the 2 times they played against each other. I like Mike Conley quite a bit, especially on a sort of specious slate where there's a whole lot of hot air. I'm a reasonable fan of paying the price on Mike Conley. I'd still project him under 50, but a more solid play than many of the other ones here. Someone does have to be productive in this contest. Looking at the Grizzlies, I do think he's the most likely suspect to carry a lot of this offense. Again, Gasol is in. I don't think he's out of play in tournaments. Obviously, Joel Embiid is also not out of play in tournaments, just at what I expect his ownership to be approximately. I would be disinclined to playing a lot of Joel Embiid. He's played I don't know how many games against Marc Gasol in his career. I'll look it up since, again, we only have a few games on the slate. But my notes and my top-of-head memory both indicate that it is not a spot that I would be particularly looking to target. So games Joel Embiid has played against Marc Gasol. He's played 4 games, 37, 34, 33, and 44 fantasy points, 44 being earlier this year in that overtime game. None of those are good for 11,000. Hashtag analysis. He's obviously a better player than he used to be. You can argue he picks up a minute or 2 with Wilson Chandler now missing this game. I don't think there's any way in which you look at Joel Embiid and say he can't put up 70 even against Marc Gasol, potentially a crippled Marc Gasol, but I do expect him to still have a fair amount of ownership. The public is very understandably in love with him and his larger-than-life personality and talents, but this is about as bad of a spot as you get out of him. It actually might be the worst spot. Yep, this is the worst spot in the NBA for Joel Embiid. So because he has a certain floor of ownership, because he's amazing and it's a short slate and he's still going to have giant ownership, I'm going to let it go. I'm going to spend that money elsewhere. I figure that's a full analysis there. Wilson Chandler being out does add Mike Muscala as a very nice piece of value on a slate, largely devoid of nice pieces of value. They don't have any problem running him out there next to Embiid, so he's going to play a lot of 4. He's going to play some 5. He's going to play all the 5 behind Embiid as well, we think, unless this game gets blown out and you get, more Amir Johnson in your life. But I like Mike Muscala quite a bit. I'm pretty sure he's my favorite piece of value on this slate. It's site dependent. I think, I prefer Avery Bradley a little more on FanDuel because you're not losing your center spot which does have some strong upside play. So it ends up being site dependent. But Mike Muscala, a very nice piece of value there. Guys are going to shift down on this team without Wilson Chandler there, so you are going to get a couple extra minutes of Landry Shamet. Still don't really want to play Landry Shamet, but it makes him more of a GPP consideration. Butler is actually going to get a little bit of time all the way down at the 4. Not a good matchup for him. I'm honestly, for me, on DraftKings, especially where the prices are down a little bit, Simmons in a tournament is fine. Redick in a tournament is fine. Butler in a tournament is fine. I don't mind you playing Muscala and anything. Embiid in a tournament is fine. But I don't like any of them. I think there's a very real chance that no one here ends up being particularly good. And most of those guys are going to have some sort of ownership. I would just let it go and focus on the games that are not, shit. Because this one really kind of is. Looking at Memphis a little closer, I do like Mike Conley. He's probably the only player in this game I'm legitimately like, yes, I want to play Mike Conley. I think I'd want more than the field has of Mike Conley. It'll be interesting to see where he comes in and ends up being owned. I'm going to take a look at the Osmo.com ownership projections, the best in the industry, which you get access to once you become a paid member here at Osmo.com. And I'll just share a couple of the numbers here, and we'll see where all this comes in. Looking at DraftKings right now, and as I suspected, some of these guys are fairly highly owned. This currently suggests 25% Joel Embiid. I imagine that's about the case. I'm going to let it go. 10,600 is a very good price for him. He is adjusted for playing against Memphis. But at that price, 55 and under, I'm feeling fine. And 55 would represent his best game ever against Marc Gasol by 11. So can it happen? Yeah, sure, obviously. But that's about where I would have guessed the ownership is as well. So I agree with our projection that he's in the mid-20s. And I would definitely take the under on that. Guys over that are interesting, and yeah, I generally agree that these numbers are about right, and most of them are looking at that later game. But they have Ben Simmons here projected for a 30% ownership. I also don't want that. Even at 8,600, that's a nice price. Sure, there's a ceiling on top of that, but I am just simply going to play guys from the later game. I would rather save $800 and play DeRozan. I would rather spend $800 and play Damian Lillard. I'd rather play some of the excellent value plays. I feel like this is forcing it a little bit, so you want to have some tournament exposure there, that's fine with me. But again, and I will randomly look up Ben Simmons' games against Memphis, but again, according to notes and common sense and just what I have off the top of my head, I don't think he's been particularly good there either. 3 games. That overtime game, he got 44, which... not bad. The other 2 games, he played 35 minutes and had 20 DraftKings points, played 25 minutes and had 38 DraftKings points. Now, you can amortize that 25 into 38 game, and if he played 34 minutes, that's 51 DraftKings points. So, again, not a particularly hospitable environment. He is priced down. And if he was going to be 10% owned, I'd love Ben Simmons. And that's really the key to playing DFS well is reacting to ownership. There's been a ton of times this year that I've loved a guy in a matchup and then disliked the same guy in almost the same matchup. It just has to do where you think the ownership is. This still has him at 25-30%. I don't disagree with that. Someone just asked, do we like Muscala? Yes, maybe just join the show a little bit late. I'm a big fan of Muscala at this point. He should play 32, 34 minutes. The matchup is obviously terrible, but even if he gets well under his average fantasy points a minute, which are like 0.9, let's assume he gets 0.7, well, it's still 22, 23 fantasy points. I'm feeling okay with that, and there certainly is a ceiling more there. Going back to talk about Memphis a little bit more than they deserve, Garrett Temple is especially cheap on FanDuel, 4,100. You can certainly run that out there in a tournament. That's a spot I don't mind going at them either. He's going to get his 30 minutes. I can see doing that. Kyle Anderson would just be DK, would just be tournaments. Jaren Jackson you can play in a tournament on either site. It is a terrible matchup. It's a good thing Marc Gasol is in, otherwise we would have seen him start at center and watch Joel Embiid foul him out in about that long to get 6 fouls from Joel Embiid onto Jaren Jackson. But, Mike Muscala probably going to stack on a few of them. They'll still be on the court at the same time, and you will see Embiid switched onto Jaren Jackson, and there's still a very real chance of some fouls being accrued there. Jaren Jackson being one of the 3 or 4 most foul-heavy guys in the NBA, and Joel Embiid stacking them up like few others. But Jaren Jackson just carries with him a massive, massive upside no matter what he plays in. Steals, blocks, threes. He can do all the high-scoring events, so I like him. Wayne Selden is in. No thanks. Yeah, he's minimum price both sites. You want to play Wayne Selden at minimum price in a tournament, go ahead, but not excited for it. Shelvin Mack, I think the bloom is off their rose a little bit after a pretty unlikely month of him starting this season. You can play JaMychal Green. Not crazy. Even in games where we didn't get foul trouble on Jaren Jackson and Marc Gasol, we've seen games where they just run their bigs a ton. Having the extra Muscala time out there leads to this team being a little bigger. So maybe they go more towards a front court rotation like that where Muscala and Gasol... I move up my microphone. Look at that, everybody. Only like 14 minutes into the show, I moved up my microphone. I'm really smart. So maybe due to the size of this Philadelphia team, or many fouls accrued by playing against Joel Embiid, you see JaMychal Green get more time again against other large lineups. We've seen basically him and Jaren and Marc Gasol comprise the entire front court rotation. So certainly don't mind JaMychal Green in some tournaments. Let's move on to a game that makes me slightly less ill. Oh God, it's the other 6 p.m. game. This makes me no less ill. The Heat and the Jazz, even lower over-under than that last game, sitting around 210 at the moment. Injury news. We still have no Goran Dragic, no Tyler Johnson, no Derek Jones Jr., no Dion Waiters, no half the team for Miami waiting to come back and make this rotation even more of a nightmare. Again, the Heat team is to a man cheaper on DraftKings. The 6 or 7 guys I can think of. So while I'm not a huge fan of any of these guys in what is still a bad matchup, again, this Jazz team is still bad. They're still allowing, they're still top 10 defense by most metrics. And I do expect that to improve, although they've been a massive disappointment versus what I expected to start the year. We can talk about that more another time. Josh Richardson is always going to be in play without Goran Dragic. He does have a 50-point upside. The price on, FanDuel is not cheap, but on a 4-game slate, it's not insane to play him at 78. On DraftKings at 72. He's much more of a cash game play. You like him for 35 in this spot. He makes plenty of sense. Tournaments are asking for a lot in a pretty stiffy matchup. The rest of this rotation, again, getting a little bit crowded here, especially as you get towards the front court. Magruder, more of a cashy play, 5,000 and 4,800. Not 5,000 and 4,800, that's not a real number. 5,000 and 4,800 being his salaries. I'm fine with it. Again, not a spot you have any real reason to think he is, got a big upside. I'd much rather play Shai Gilgeous-Alexander in better games than any number of other players. But on a 4-game slate, Magruder more cashy than Wayne Ellington. Wayne Ellington on DK in tournaments, I think I actually like it. His price at 4,400 can certainly disappoint, but a game where he can get his, he should be able to get a couple of the shots that give him a chance to hit some sort of ceiling. Not in love, but if you're playing a tournament guy from the Heat on DK, there's a few guys priced too cheap on DK. James Johnson is still 3,900. He's getting 16, 18, 19 minutes. That can come up, obviously. At some point, I do expect it to come up. I think he's playing 24, 26 by the end of the year. One of the few guys on this team who's actually had a really good game against the Jazz, had one last year where he put up 40-something fantasy points. I don't think that means exactly anything. The most likely line you're looking at out of him is high teens in minutes, high teens in fantasy points. But 4,100 on FanDuel, you can drop it. 3,900 on DK, even slightly better priced. I would rather play Muscala in cash or tournaments even, I think. But having James Johnson as a tournament guy in there makes some sense. Basically the same as Ellington. Basically the same as Justice Winslow. Not a good spot. Most likely you're looking at 26 minutes, 21 fantasy points. But 4,600 on FanDuel, droppable on a 4-game slate especially. That's not a number you kill yourself if you have to drop. 4,200 on DK. And Bam Adebayo on a slate this short makes sense in tournaments just based on, maybe Whiteside gets in some trouble. Whiteside himself, tends to limit Gobert, and Gobert tends to limit him. They've played 4 or 5 times in their careers, and Whiteside's minutes do tend to trend up. They need him out here. It is more of a Whiteside spot than a Bam spot. On its face, obviously, we're concerned about foul trouble for Whiteside, his role in the offense, and relationship with the team always a bit in flux. But again, 4-game slate, you can get. I think this is the 20. He had a game last year, which I believe was 8 and 20 with 3 steals and 3 blocks against the Jazz. The only time he's had really any sort of ceiling game there. But that is a real possibility here. Gobert limits driving guys, takes up a lot of space, but doesn't really limit opposing centers' fantasy production. We've seen that this year where centers against the Jazz have actually done just fine. So Whiteside makes plenty of sense in tournaments. 8,200 on FanDuel, expensive. All the centers much better priced on DraftKings today. So Whiteside is right in that DeAndre Jordan and Nurkic range on both sites, where they're all 8,000-ish on FanDuel and 7,000-ish, even a little less on DK. I consider him the most risky, but quite possibly the best tournament play on both sites. It's going to be wrong a lot, but the ownership is going to be well down compared to Nurkic and DeAndre Jordan and other guys, so I think that's a place I like to go. I don't really think I want to spend mid-fives on Dwayne Wade. Obviously not strictly wrong, has shown some big games even against great defensive teams like the Raptors recently. But no particular reason to think that this is another day that D. Wade pops off. I'm seeing messages, so something must have happened. Doncic out. Heat will start Richardson, Ellington, Magruder, James Johnson, and Whiteside. So, yes, that's what we expected. The Heat starting their same guys, but Doncic is out. That's 1 of 4, so now all we need is news on Powell and Kleber and Dennis Smith Jr., and we'll know what's going on there. But that news a little earlier than I would have liked it. So for the moment, we'll just say don't play Luka Doncic. But we'll go right on to that game as we speak. Let me answer this tweet real quick. Do you like Reddit today? Spelled Reddick wrong. Reddick only one D. People get that wrong. I will reply with one word. No. There it is. Nothing like great analysis. Kleber ruled out. The pins are falling. Okay, so we really want to play more guys. So more reasons to not like those early games is they're shit and they're slow and they're good defensive teams, and both on paper and expectancy the guys don't look that good. We're having all kinds of guys out in these late games. That leads to extra production. The Dallas News breaking now. I'm not referring to the newspaper. That's the Dallas Morning News. But the news in Dallas breaking now. Wished it would have waited a little bit. Had people a little less time to pivot there. But let's go ahead and talk about the Clippers going into Dallas. By far the fastest game of the day, over under 225, 226, I think, and expected to be a close game. So just using your basic DFS skills, a game we're a little more interested in targeting here. I'll talk about the Clippers first, so I give Dallas a little more time to put out the news on those last two guys. I would expect it to be coming soon with those other two pieces dropping just a minute ago. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander projects very well. He's still very cheap, had his sort of national coming out game recently, and is getting basically 30 minutes every night. And usually, at least not disrespecting his price tag of 51 and 54. You just look at his last 6 games, you get 23, 35, 20, 24, 32, 41. And that's a very nice range of prices for a guy who costs, say, $5,100. You're not happy with the 20, you're not happy with the 24s, but there's a 35, a 33, and a 41 in there. Those all feel pretty delicious, especially in a matchup that is fast and against an undermanned Mavericks team now. So Shai, I would expect to be pretty popular. I am guessing he will be higher than he is in our current projections, which right now in DraftKings suggest he is 19%. I would think he'd be closer to the upper 20s at this point. And we do not have an update yet. But I would think that you would get him closer to the upper 20s. He just prices in extremely well as a play. Avery Bradley, humorously enough, an incredibly strong play on FanDuel where he's $3,500. DraftKings at $4,200. In play, certainly. Actually coming off, he's consistently getting time, and I believe good 3 of the last 4 games when I eyeball this. Last 4 games showing you both ceiling and floor, but 3 ceilings and 1 floor. Last 4 games, 26 against Memphis, feels pretty good. 24 against Portland, you're fine with that at his price. 7 against Phoenix. So, when you're looking for a play that's uncertain, when you play Phoenix 29 minutes and you get 7.4 fantasy points, that indicates that you're always carrying a floor. And then Sacramento 29, but 24, 26, 29, 3 of his last 4 games. DK, he's fine. But FanDuel at the actual floor, $3,500, opens up your ability to play a lot of these other guys. So, big fan of that there. Getting to their 2 forwards, who again are doing basically what we've talked about the whole year. On FanDuel, I'd be much happier playing Tobias Harris. He's $800 more than Danilo Gallinari. Obviously, he's a bit more expensive. With him and Montrezl Harrell, both of whom are power forwards on FanDuel, I would probably move towards Tobias Harris as the more cashy option. Oh my God, the injuries. Kevin Kemba Walker headed to the locker room now. This early DFS slate is turning into a bit of a minefield. Yeah, so Kemba and Devin Booker going down. The Spurs will start Bryn Forbes, DeRozan, Gay, Bertans, and Aldridge on Sunday. Okay, we'll get to that game in a minute. News coming out, not as good for our DFS profitability, but very good for my ability to host a show of and by myself, which is more difficult than you might think for no reason than talking for an hour straight. Put some strain on the vocal cords. So now, Gallinari 6,400 on DK. Yeah, I like that a lot. That is still just an underprice. He should cost about $7,000 over there. I'd project him for a touch over 30. It just feels very good at 6,400 in a fast game forward position we're happy to fill. So I like Gallinari quite a bit on DK. He'd be in. I mean, if I was building 150 lineups, I'd have like 60%. I think I'd have like 90 Gallinari. Just really hard for him to hurt you. Too bad. Until the eventual game, which will come at some point soon, where he goes Kemba Walker, Devin Booker, and heads to the locker room. But until that's just too cheap. FanDuel is 7,600. I think I prefer some of these small forward options a little bit more. Whether or not it is... well, let me look at it to make sure I get a decent idea. Harrison Barnes, I like a lot. We're going to get to in a second, especially with more and more guys going out. He's too cheap on FanDuel at 6,000. I like that a fair amount. Rudy Gay is only 5,800, and the absence of Marco Bellinelli should maybe free up a little time for him. There's some stuff going on with the Spurs team, so I have some amount of interest in Rudy Gay here, even having been so disappointing recently. Still getting the start. But to get back to talking about our Clippers friends here, I don't think I have any interest in Gortat. The ceiling really caps out about 20. I would rather Muscala, basically same position everywhere. And yeah, Montrez, priced still pretty well on BK. No reason to think this is a spot he still can continue to excel in, and is, basically grabbing you that 40 every night. Feels pretty good at 7,700. FanDuel, obviously, we are starting to price out the ceiling a little bit. Did have that 160-point game, but most of his games are banging out 35 to 45. That doesn't feel great at 8,800. Now, there's a lot of very good value, and especially on a Gallinari greater than Harrison Barnes with the Dallas news or nah. DK, they're priced identically, so that makes it very interesting. I like Harrison Barnes a lot regardless, so my answer would be hopefully both. But at this point, a raw projection, it's going to be really close at this point. I'm going to have to crunch a couple numbers. I will take a brief break and take a swing at Dallas, what exactly I expect out of them. But I'd have them both very close. I'd probably prefer Harrison Barnes at this point. Which is a shame, because I like recommending Gallinari. It has been good business this year. Lou Williams in play on FanDuel at 6,200, but the minutes obviously not all they've been in the past, and so obviously putting a cap on him. 5,200 on DK, a little more palatable. Makes some sense in tournaments there and can get you 30, 35. Has done it a few times recently in his 20 to 24 minutes. Pat Beverly, not out of play in a 4-game slate, but single-digit fantasy points each of the last 2 games. You would have to really want it. So... no Maxi Kleber, no Luka Doncic. Still questionable on Dennis Smith Jr. and on Dwight Powell. Okay, let's take a fresh look at this. Dorian Finney-Smith will now come into play just because he is going to pick up some 30 minutes with all these guys out. Aldridge or Harris on FanDuel GPP got 900 left. That's probably supposed to be 9,000. Although, Aldridge or Harris, you could also have Harrell, but maybe you already have Harrell in there. For a tournament, I'm probably... That's very close for me. I'll probably go with Tobias Harris. Wish I could say I wanted to play Aldridge more, but I'll probably just take Harris there. So, again, with those guys out, we're obviously opening up some number of minutes here. Kleber, not a guy who takes up as much time as these other guys we're talking about, but Luka Doncic being out is going to open up lots of shots, lots of scoring, lots of just ball handling. So we like Dennis Smith more than we would on most days, and I don't think a lot of people go there because, frankly, he's been remarkably disappointing this year. But 6,000, 5,500, where he now resumes lead ball handling duties, feels pretty good. You meant Harrell. So, I mean, when you talk about just to do that again real quick, FanDuel power forward. When we talk about, I do think Harrell is barely your best cash option if the price is irrelevant versus Tobias Harris, though it's really close. Does probably carry a higher upside in tournaments. So you're playing Harrell if you can afford him. Past that, between Tobias and Aldridge, I probably play Tobias in both. You could make an argument for Aldridge in GPPs. Revenge not being a big thing. These two teams did play earlier this year, and Aldridge was very tepid. You got near 50 out of DeRozan, but you got 33, 35 out of Aldridge in that game. So price coming down a little better on DK, still pretty high for a disappointing Aldridge on FanDuel. Neither of which incredibly right or wrong on a 4-game slate, but that's my gut. For the rest of the Mavs, so all the healthy guys feel pretty good. The three we're going to talk about here in order from least to greatest that I like their improvement based on the absence of guys. DeAndre Jordan, a little better with all this going on, has a decent rapport with Dennis Smith. I don't think the absence of Doncic hurts him as much as it helps him, I'll put it that way. So I do think this is a boost for him. FanDuel or DraftKings, obviously DK 6,700, that feels pretty good. The guy silver medal for improvement without these guys would be Wesley Matthews. Just projects to take a few more shots. That's one of his prime sources, like most players, of picking up fantasy points. So I like Wesley, who was already a little bit underpriced after missing some time for injury, has come back and appeared to be slotting right back into playing, pretty significant minutes. They had the one quasi-blowout versus Houston where he only played low 20s, but 30 and 32 minutes in the other two games, and with all this extra usage floating around, 4,700, 4,500, makes quite a bit of sense to play Wes Matt anywhere you can get your hands on him. Sorry. Checking something. Okay. And then, Harrison Barnes, the gold medalist there. Just the shots are going to come up a fair amount. The offense should play into his hands a little bit. I like the rotation for him the most anyway. I like coming at this Clippers team from the forwards whenever possible anyway. And so he's checking all the boxes of things I want to do there. So Harrison Barnes, my favorite guy to get in here. And the ownership will come up with this news, but looking at early projection, also sitting at 19%. I think that'll come up to around 25%, but I'm going to feel pretty good about having him 25%. Evan Turner is a game time decision, so sure, we'll use that. Oh, I should say, so Dorian Finney-Smith, who I hate talking about, but at this point, regardless of what happens with the rest of the injury news, is probably going to get in there and get himself his 30 minutes. FanDuel at 4,300, I'm looking elsewhere, but 3,600 on DK is just fine. More of a cash punt for me. Not a real upside guy, but lots of usage floating around, and more importantly, the minutes where you get something like 30. And last guy in Devin Harris, 3,300, probably my favorite uber cheapie on DK now, if you're getting, the sub-Muscala range. Is Powell the pivot from Muscala? I need to hear that he's definitely in, but DeAndre Jordan or Embiid? Well, Embiid raw points, but I like DeAndre Jordan much more as a play, which hopefully I've made clear. But $3,300 Devin Harris, also going to have a real role now. He's, last few games played high teens to 20 minutes, and a couple times had some big games. 4 games ago against Brooklyn was 18 minutes, 34 fantasy points. 2 games ago against Houston was 15 minutes, 33 fantasy points. That makes a lot of sense for me. Thoughts on Garrett Temple as a FanDuel punt drop? Yeah, I specifically mentioned that's where I'm fine with him. On DK, I don't really want to spend the 4,100 on him, but FanDuel makes plenty of sense. Again, I think Avery Bradley is a superior one at 3,500. But shooting guard, they're always a fine place to drop, and I'd probably have them ranked. I really like spending. If you can get the $600, I really like playing Wesley Matthews, because Garrett Temple he's probably going to get me 15 to 25 and very possibly get dropped. Wesley Matthews is a real shot of picking up 33 and being very good for his $4,700. So I'm fine with you playing Garrett Temple. But if I had him in my lineup, I would be really trying to get up to Wes Matt. Moving on to the last game, only 535. I am crushing it. Thoughts on playing DSJ, DAJ, Barnes in a GPP? I think that's great. It's only 3 guys from the same team. None of them are that expensive. And you're stacking up a great game. Try to get some Harrell or Gallinari or Tobias in there as well. But yeah, I'm a huge fan of playing all those guys concurrently. Let's go into the last game. Again, going to be a close game. My second favorite game of the evening. The other 7 o'clock game, Portland going into San Antonio. Currently just a 1-point spread. Bigger over-under than either of the two earlier games and just slightly more concentrated fantasy value. Evan Turner is questionable. If Evan Turner is in, I like Evan Turner quite a bit. The ownership will be non-existent. It's a 4-game slate. It's a spot I'm happy to go at the Spurs with him running that second unit. So I'm a huge fan of playing Evan Turner if we get news that he is in time for whatever portal in which you are playing. If he's out, it adds a little to a few guys there. Mo Harkless, don't really want to do that. Jake Layman, don't really want to do that. But it does make it interesting for CJ McCollum, who will probably start running the second unit offense again. Basically the big shift that they made to this team this year. Dwight Powell is in. Dennis Smith is in. All right, so we got all our Mavs news. Again, 25 minutes before early lock and an hour 25 before the game. I'm real hard to please because when the Suns do it the other way, I'm like, what the fuck, Suns? And then the Mavs come out and do it great, and I'm like, couldn't you have waited a while? That was good value. But yeah, Dwight Powell, again, makes a very strong play here. Should trend up for a couple of more minutes with Maxi Kleber not playing. And again, signs next to his name make people less likely to play him. So yeah, I like a little DP tonight. Kemba Walker available to return. I know everyone was really worried about that. Spurs. So yeah, we have no Marco Bellinelli. So Rudy Gay, Piston Pops Cheerios or something has become very, very limited as far as minutes. Went back up to 25 last game. The 2 games before that, like 17 and 18. That's not particularly exciting, but has honestly played better this year than I expected. Seems close to fully recovered from the dreadful Achilles injury. People keep asking me questions I already talked about. You guys are killing me. You're in the premium Slack, so I'm going to handle your questions still, but there's a lot of reduxing here because you're all watching your football and then you come and you're like, oh, what about this guy that I talked about for 10 minutes? Anyhow. I don't really want to play the Bryn Forbes, Derek White, Marco's out, Patty Mills, that tertiary of, guys you can always play for the Spurs. Feels a lot like, power forwards and centers without Draymond for the Golden State Warriors. Forbes is getting the start. At this point, I would probably rank them Forbes, Mills, White. And they're all playable. If you're playing 150 lineups, by all means have 10 Forbes, 7 Mills, and 2 White, but not out of control here. Mitchell, LaMarcus, or DeRozan. Yeah, it says something that somehow I managed to basically skip the Jazz team in its entirety and not even notice for 20 minutes. We'll go back to the Jazz when we're done with this game. I'd be most inclined towards DeRozan of those guys you listed. This sets up better for a DeRozan game than an Aldridge game anyway, and DeRozan's price on DK has come way down, and he's going to get back to having 50 and 60-point fantasy games this year. I feel more secure in the role, the usage, the whole thing. $7,800 on DK is a fine number, and $8,600 on FanDuel. While my first inclination is to punt that position, certainly not out of play in tournaments. Rudy Gay, a strong tournament play for me. Especially with Bellinelli out. Real chance to see 30 minutes again, and he can crush a $5,400 price tag. And Aldridge, certainly just fine to play. Has had big games against Portland, but not any reason to think that's really been a revenge spot for him. But the ownership will be down because he's been bad. And I'm not shocked to see 50 out of him today, nor should you be. Yeah, that's about where I land on this team. Again, McCollum possibly picking up the second unit offense leading role with Evan Turner out for the day. Now I can't remember. Is Evan Turner... He's just a game time decision. If Evan Turner is out, I'm a bigger fan of CJ McCollum because as opposed to most of the year where they've been running basically McCollum and Lillard next to each other the whole time, which really limits McCollum's upside just because of the absence of ball handling, fewer touches, etc. If Turner is out, I imagine they go back to something like they've seen last year, and you end up with McCollum running the second unit. To crystallize this, actually, if you look at their game logs from when they played, this was October, but when they played the Spurs the first time, both McCollum and Lillard shot 9 of 15 from the field. McCollum actually had one more of his baskets be a 3. He was 4 of 7 from 3 and had 5 2-pointers. Lillard was 3 of 6 from 3 and had 6 2-pointers, and McCollum ended with 16 fewer fantasy points. And that's what happens when one of you gets 2 assists and the other guy gets 9. But if Evan Turner is out, I think they probably shift back to McCollum running their second unit, and that feels good. And that would make me pretty excited to get some exposure to that. You can always play Al-Farouq Aminu in tournaments. The matchup's just fine on paper. He himself an incredibly inconsistent player, but feel free to do that. And Nurkic still just too cheap on DK. It is a matchup in which his minutes have been kind of up and down, but with more Aldridge at the 5, I think you get more up here. 7,100 is still just a little too cheap for him on DK. 8,100 perfectly fair on FanDuel, so it is worth it, Yusuf Nurkic. Let's go back and talk about the Jazz, who I was disinclined about enough that I basically didn't mention when talking about the Jazz and Heat game. I talked about the Heat for a while and just sort of skipped over the Jazz. You can play Kyle Korver if you want. People ask me, but his ceiling is like 25, and it's 20 real points and then a rebound and an assist, and he had a 3-block game recently that sort of cracked me up. But Kyle Korver, not a super ceiling guy. Again, I'd rather play him on FanDuel, and on FanDuel there are superior shooting guard punts. But a 4-game slate, if it's going to make you happy, knock yourself out and play the Great White Hope there. Yeah, not a on-paper great spot for anyone. I get wanting to play Gobert. 9,000, 8,400. Has basically 55 and 60 in his last 2 games. That's very nice. I'm not going to talk anyone out of playing Rudy Gobert, but the matchup, not a particularly stellar one. Whiteside tends to play a lot, gobble up a lot of rebounds, puts a cap on the ceiling there. So I would rather try to get my ceiling game out of DeAndre Jordan at 6,700 than spend a couple grand more on Rudy Gobert. But feel free to play Rudy Gobert. I don't think he gets you 50, but I'd be pretty surprised if he doesn't get you 40. Certainly none of the other guys are so rock solid you have to go there. Ingles is all the way down to 5,200 on DK. Again, is going to give you 25 against the Heat. That's basically what he's given you the last few times. Perfectly solid, sort of mid-range. Feel free to drop in there as last guy. I'm not scrambling to do it, but it makes sense. Donovan Mitchell, has real tournament upside here. Played the Heat twice in his rookie year, gave you the results you'd expect. He had one shit game at like 25, one better game at like 35. But 7,900, the price has come down a little bit. You could get 45 out of him here. Just tournaments for me. Don't hate, but don't love. But if he ends up in your line, if you're looking for another piece of this game or just want a guy from this game, he obviously has a 35-shot game this year. So there is a real ceiling to be had there. Sort of the same thing with Rubio. With Mitchell in, that ceiling is obviously muted, but absolutely not killer. Otto Porter out again tomorrow. Okay. Wizards team really screwing things up all the way around. So I think we've basically answered all sorts of questions here. So I'm going to start reading the premium Slack questions and then head over to the YouTube chat. Here we go. DFS or Bertans and a DK GPP? I would go with DFS right now. It hurts me to say that. Thoughts on Triple J and a GPP? I like him a lot as a tournament play. He's just always going to be a good tournament play. He barely got a B today as opposed to an A in my rankings. But and it's a pretty rare spot he doesn't get an A. But yeah, all the upside in the world, all the downside in the world. Him getting infinite foul trouble in 5 seconds really couldn't surprise me. Mitchell, LaMarcus, or DeRozan, rank them, please. I think if we did this, I'd have DeRozan first in both cash and tournaments. Do you think Boban gets enough run with DeAndre Jordan and Dwight Powell? I'll guess no. I think most situations can be handled by some combination of Gortat and Montrez, but I would say it's less than 50% likely he sees the court. That being said, through foul trouble or just Doc feeling fruity, you can get that game, and it's not crazy to play whatever the price is. I'm guessing 3,500-ish on DK Boban. Just on the shot it works out, but it's the ultimate high-risk play. MT or TH FanDuel GPP? I'm going to guess MT is supposed to be sort of MH. Maybe that's supposed to be Montrez, because TH is probably Tobias Harris. And it's saying in a tournament, I will stick with Montrez. Sorry you missed me talking about Jordan. Thoughts on him? Well, yeah, I like him quite a bit. Has been very good and had 20 rebound games over Gortat in the past. I'm not worried about his role with against Montrez, against Gortat. I expect him to be just fine. It's He's priced appropriately, but I'm a big fan of playing DeAndre Jordan. No issues with that whatsoever. Muscala or Powell. Muscala cash, Powell a fine tournament pivot. I think that's good. Any love for Lillard? I love Damian Lillard, actually. See, I somehow skipped over that. I talked about the Trailblazers, but not Damian Lillard. That's impressive. Yeah, I like Lillard a lot. I like point guards quite a bit against the Spurs these days. I like him at home. He carries a huge upside, a reasonably safe floor. But there's been a few times this year I've taken much more sketchy point guards against the Spurs and put some respect on their name. The big Ryan Arcidiacono game that I was on, not the second one, which everyone was on, but the first one, which was 5% owned, was against the Spurs, and I do think it's a great spot. So I like Lillard quite a bit, but oddly enough, a little bit less if Evan Turner is out. Will Powell see time next to DeAndre Jordan now? If so, how much do you think? Yeah, I'm going to take a minute and run a query because I want to check something here. So I do apologize for what is going to be 60 seconds of dead air, but I do want to go in and come up with some sort of perspective rotation, so I have to download a couple things and look at a couple things and see exactly how I think the minutes are going to go here. So again, looking at the recent game, we have 32 minutes of Doncic we need to make up for, and there's still no Maxi Kleber. He didn't play in that game. And Doncic had the standard rotations after sitting out 3 for a blowout. So we'll call that 35. They'll shift that in there. Harris will take his normal shifts. Smith and Barea will work the same. Powell will pick up part of that. And either Ryan Brokoff or Jalen Brunson maybe picks up a shift there. So, right. So there's a real question as to whether or not Dwight Powell picks up any extra time here. My guess will be no, and he will function purely as a backup based on the last few games that I'm looking at and some games from last year where we were in a similar situation. So no, I still think you are probably getting, we'll call it, 15 to 18 minutes of Dwight Powell. That being said, it's a great matchup for him. You want Montrez on the court, which there will be when he's in there, and a real ceiling player. But I don't think you actually get extra minutes out of Dwight Powell here, is my best guess looking at my notes. Thank you for what is a very, very good question. And remind me to check that later if I don't. But very good question. DSJ or Rubio? I'm definitely with DSJ now. Wes Matthews and Rudy Gay or Gallinari and Dwight Powell in a GPP. I play Wes Matt and Rudy Gay. You think it's fine playing Rubio and Mitchell together, or should you keep them separated, offspring style? They're in a vacuum better together. If you choose to stack that game, just very doable on a short slate, feel free to play them both. Just try to run it back with someone opposite the way. Obvious. Muscala, DFS, or Bertans? Muscala, the best of those in cash for me, then DFS, then Bertans. In tournaments, probably DFS, then Muscala, but probably just Muscala, actually. I'd stick with Muscala. On Trezl or Mitchell, DK, GPP. Probably Mitchell for ownership at that point. It's going to be better. Flying over to the YouTube chat for a couple questions for the premium slot. It has run dry. Holy shit, you guys are productive in here. I know you're mostly talking to each other and not me, but 10 minutes to go. Your most playable cash center on FanDuel. Mike Muscala or... I think Muscala is my cash center on FanDuel. I'm fine with playing several of these other guys. I'm fine with DeAndre Jordan. It's Muscala or DeAndre Jordan is the first guy I'm trying to play in cash on FanDuel. Great question, though. Hey, Freddie, this is your first day. Hi, it's Eddie, but nice to meet you. You wouldn't play Harris. I'm curious why someone's saying that. I would play Harris. I have no reason not to. Gilgeous-Alexander, a lock for you. You are wise beyond your years. I now think that pivoting to Dennis Smith Jr. makes a fair amount of sense, for what it's worth, should you have the money. You're thinking Embiid and Harris get you there? Again, I'm very, very sketchy on Embiid. I love Embiid. Everyone loves Embiid, but this is a day where I think everyone loving Embiid is bad for those who play him. he's phenomenal. Is there a chance he goes off and gives you 65 here? Yes, but, Nurkic or Jordan, Lillard or Conley on DK. I'm going to play Conley for the savings on DK. I like him better at price, which I'll assume is the import of the question. Nurkic or Jordan would be Jordan in cash. Nurkic in tournaments between those two for me. SGA or Lou Will is SGA in everything, or maybe Lou Will in tournaments, but SGA just looks very, very good. Jordan and Conley. Hey, someone agreed with me. Nice job. Rubio or McCollum. That's McCollum for me at this point. Embiid and D. Harris, if those are your choices. I'm missing the question there. You're answering each other's questions. You're killing me. Barea or Wade on DK cash? Neither. Like, at that price, play Dennis Smith Jr. at this point. Play Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Those guys are fine in tournaments if you want, but in cash, I'm not playing Barea or Wade. Finney Smith or Muscala in cash? That's Muscala for me. Embiid over under 24 basketball points. Someone might be playing on our sponsor Thrive Fantasy there. Well, I'm inclined to say under, but, that's a little disrespectful. I will tell you that in the 4 times he's played Memphis in his career, his actual points are 12, 14, 14, and 15. If that helps you with your decision a little bit. I do think, game log watching is a dangerous, practice without having context. But here you are looking at, same centers, very similar situations. Not much has changed. So what has appeared to be in the past a fairly difficult matchup, one would presume would stay so. Conley or Simmons on DK, $100 difference. I'm just going to play Conley. Apparently they're going to be owned similarly. I feel much better about Conley. If you're going to have only one for GPPs on FanDuel, Tobias or Montrez, I will stick with Montrezl Harrell Zezel. Gallo or Triple J for DK cash. It'd be Gallo for cash for me. Although I think I do prefer Harrison Barnes over Gallo even at this point. Feels bad because I love him a guy, but I'm gonna have to go with some of these guys, opening up all kinds of value there. Yeah. Muscala starting with Embiid, not surprised. Yeah, again, Muscala just not a brilliant matchup, but price in minutes, I think he's going to play 32 minutes or something, and that just feels a little too good there. So fade at your own peril. James Johnson, Powell, or Jelly O in a FanDuel GPP. I'm going to call him Jelly O from now on, though I presume you mean Mr. Olenek. I will go with James Johnson. Where are we at? 5 minutes, friends. Heading back to the YouTube, then checking some news again. Powell or James Johnson for FanDuel tourney. Someone's posting in both chats. That's uber. Jordan or Harrell DK cash. I have to go with Harrell, which feels amazing because Jordan is like such a cash guy, but yep. Would I go Simmons or Conley DK cash? I would play Conley. There's reason his initials are DFS. Ben Simmons and Mitchell or Butler and Lillard on FanDuel. So I have to play Simmons or Butler. I'm going to spend less on the game I don't like and play Lillard and Butler. Sixers will start who we thought they were. Barea starting. I would be surprised if he was starting. It doesn't see. I would not expect Barea to start. I'd be outright shocked if Barea started. You don't have to apologize if a question was asked before. I'm just teasing y'all. Gallo or Triple J for DK cash? Yeah, that's Gallo for me. You can't play Triple J almost ever in cash, and certainly not in a matchup where when it comes crashing down and it hurts inside and Joel drops the hammer a little bit. So, no. Checking the news. Turner unlikely to play. Okay, so like McCollum a little bit more. Would not super overreact past that. Makes Mo Harkless and Layman really sort of specious plays. Nurkic or Jordan, both is a fine answer. Nurkic in tournaments, Jordan in cash, however. Ingles or Gay, FanDuel GPP. I'd play Gay. I'd go Gay. SGA or Barea straight up on FanDuel. SGA for me. I like Barea a lot as a player, but we've seen some sort of silly ceiling games there for him. They're loath to give him more than like 20 minutes. Maybe you get another 28, 29 game and get a monster out of him. I feel much safer with SGA. Certainly SGA in cash. CJ over 2.5 assists with Turner out? Absolutely. I think that's the smart sort of prop betting play there. So if you can bet over 2.5 assists with CJ McCollum, I think that's a smart play. I think there's a real chance that he comes out early and runs that second unit. That is the guess. We will see. You'd be leaving money on the table if you take Aldridge, Harrell or Aldridge. Leaving money on the table and playing Aldridge over Harrell is just smart tournament play. Again, this has been a thing for a long time, but build a great lineup, then make one really weird decision, and you've got a very good tournament lineup. So everyone likes Harrell. Nobody likes Aldridge. Spend all your money and then take Aldridge and then take Harrell out at 8,800, put Aldridge in at 8,000, and you have this really, really weird lineup that's just as good as it was before, and it needs Aldridge to outscore Harrell, which is not such a weird thing. I'll outscore him 40% of the time at least. So I think that is a brilliant way to make a tournament lineup, as I have said many times in the past. Gallo or Triple J for cash? I think we've been through this. Gallinari. McCollum or Gallinari or DeMar and Gay for FanDuel cash? I'll take McCollum and Gallinari in for cash. Conley and Muscala or DSJ and Jordan for cash? I'll take Conley and Muscala. Gay and Smith Jr. or Muscala and DeRozan on DK? I feel like we've had this. And I will say Gay and Smith Jr. in tournaments. Muscala and DeRozan barely in cash. Are Lillard and McCollum negatively correlated on FanDuel? They're negatively correlated everywhere because there's simply only so many shots. You like them more if you're playing them across the other guys. But when you get into a 4-game slate, you start to sort of abandon those rules. You have to, or you end up really pigeonholing yourself into very few builds. Mills or Korver GPP, I would play Patty Mills. Barea starting tonight. Is that a question or a statement? Barea starting. It is a Devin Harris day. Barea is starting. I have a fair bit more interest in him now because he is a very productive fantasy player, and that makes it much more likely he gets 24 minutes. I don't have news specifically of JJ Barea starting, but I am looking around for it. We are 90 seconds from lock, so I want to get a good answer here. But I do not see Barea starting, so that may be some fake news. I can't confirm Barea starting, so anyone reacting to what I said. Yeah, it's not going to be a bad play anyway, so if that random, pivoted you onto him, I would not be overly upset about it, but I cannot find the news that JJ Barea is starting. If you have it, go with God there. But I would rather play Dennis Smith Jr. at a similar price from where I stand right now. I apologize for the lack of context. If those people were honestly saying he's starting and I'm somehow absent the news, but I have 2 alerts that did not get picked up. I don't have it from any of my 3 number 1 people. So I have no reason to think JJ Barea is starting with only a few seconds left to go. Yeah. Again, hopefully you have some time on DraftKings for that as a late game, and many of you are playing there, but we, my friends, are at lock. Time to play America's favorite game, and I do occasionally like to play even with just myself, and so we're going to take a look at some of the ownership for those 2 6 p.m. games. It's everyone's favorite game, Daddy Like. Shout out to Queisenberg for naming Daddy Like. So let us look at, it's not even logged in. Let me look and see if I can find me here some ownership. Alright, on DraftKings, the largest tournament is apparently the $175,000 pull-up jumper. Nice. I believe pull-up should be hyphenated and is not. So, DraftKings, step your game up. It's what we call a conjoined adjective. Okay, it's not a pull-up jumper. It's a pull-up jumper. It's an adjective. Gotta hyphenate that shit. You are killing the youth of America with your disrespect for the language of Shakespeare. No big deal. I kid because I love DraftKings. I kid because I love... Let's get in here and look at some DraftKings ownership first to also conveniently make it nice and downloadable. So while we're taking a shot at DraftKings, hey, FanDuel, how about making this sort of shit downloadable? Or if you do and I just don't know how, then I apologize for being an idiot. But if you still can't download this stuff, yeah, Joel Embiid, number one player at 7 p.m., 33%. No, that's all right. Maybe it works out, but, you know, again, 10%, I'd have been super excited. 33%. Give it the old Davis Matic. I'm good. Nah wave on that one. Mike Muscala, 30%. That's fine. That feels good. Jaren Jackson Jr., 26.5%. At that point, no thanks. Ben Simmons, 25%. No thanks. Donovan Mitchell, 20%. Bam Adebayo, 19%. Not at that number, no thanks. Mike Conley at 18%. Who I might add, I would project raw points higher than everyone but Embiid who came in over him. I like that quite a bit. Rubio, 16%. He's 6K. I get it. Someone on that Utah team is going to have a good game. Could certainly be Slick Rick there. Wade, 14%. Okay. Jimmy Butler, 12. Sure. Redick, 12. Okay. Ingles, 12. Cheap. Whiteside, 10. That feels pretty good. Corver, 9.5. Come on. What are you doing over there? Josh Richardson, 9. All right. Daddy likes that. There is a ceiling there and very safe. Wayne Ellington, 8%. Just fine with that. Kyle Anderson, 7.3. Sure. Derek Favors, 7.2. Marc Gasol, 7%. Gotta like 7% Marc Gasol. There's a real chance he's the highest scoring center on this slate. JaMychal Green, 5.6. Daddy likes. Garrett Temple, 5.3. Kelly Olynyk, 5. Rodney Mack, 4.72. Shelvin Mack, 3.8. Justice Winslow, 3.3. James Johnson, 2.8. TJ McConnell, 2.7. My computer angry. Oh, God. Landry Shamet, 2.4. He'll pick up some minutes. Wilson Chandler, 1.17. Congratulations, you played yourself. Bonus round. We'll click on some entries on FanDuel, which I think an entry. Yes, I do have something. The $150,000 shot, which at least you didn't screw up any hyphenation there. Josh Richardson, 22%. Mike Conley, 29%. Jaren Jackson Jr., 35% on FanDuel at $7,000. I mean, I hope y'all get there. I'm sure that some of the people listening to the show, I get it. And I was fine. I still gave him a B GPP ranking and almost gave him an A just because he's just a monster GPP guy. But when Gasol came in, it made him a little safer because he sees less Embiid, less likely he fouls out, but lowers the upside a little bit. It's very interesting. Mike Muscala, 11% as the center punt there, which is fine. You're taking a stand that none of the other centers go nutter. Other guys I can find by clicking on lineups. 30% for Jay Crowder. I probably want less than that in that matchup. 29% Joel Embiid. Again, maybe you get there. He's really, really good. He's had 4 games. His high fantasy points in regulation in those 4 games is under 40. Good luck. Feel free to, I will accept your hate tweets. Come at me, in the event Joel Embiid puts up 55 plus tonight. Maybe I'll run a free roll or something for dissuading you all horribly. But I'm hoping in approximately 2.5 hours to be reveling in our collective riches at being well under the field on Joel Embiid, who put up 31 fantasy points or something. Jimmy Butler, 14%. Donovan Mitchell, 35% on FanDuel. Jiminy Christmas. Wow. Look at these chickens. 28% for Ben Simmons. Bam Adebayo, 9%. Which, again, I'm okay with that. That feels okay. Other dudes. The dudes are emerging. Other dudes. Gobert, 12%. I'm fine with that. That feels good. You're spending for him, but that's okay. 8% Favors. I like Favors at 8%. He can do the steely block thing. 15% on D. Wade. Kelly O, 12%. Sure. Marc Gasol, 5%. Let me just check something real quick. Has Joel Embiid ever outscored Marc Gasol head-to-head? Just want to check before I specifically say this. Because there's a real chance we're looking at a situation where one guy is 4-0 against the other guy, and the other guy is... Oh, no, that's right, he had that real shit game. Yeah, he had the, I think it was foul trouble game, but he had a totally dog shit game last year. So yes, like he had 21 in only 25 minutes. In one of the games, Embiid had 35. So they're actually 2-2 lifetime. He snuck out another one too. So they are 2-2. Not that crazy. And again, I wouldn't have been super excited about spending 10-2 on Marc Gasol, which is not a good matchup for him either. In his 4 games against Embiid, he has 48.5 exactly in 2 of them. But even that isn't making the shocks roll up and down. So hard for me to do that over Nurkic, Jordan, Whiteside. If you had a lot of lineups, if I'm building 100 lineups, yeah, there's certainly some exposure to Big Mark there. But there you go. So shout out to Marc Gasol doing the swag walk, one of my favorite things in the world when it happens. Shout out Team Tracy, my friend's wife dealing with breast cancer. You are in my thoughts. That being said, I'm done. I imagine there's some 7 p.m. slates. Feel free to send me some questions if you have them. I will be back again tomorrow doing this voodoo that I do so well alongside all the other great hosts at awesemo.com. Stop by and see us sometime, and please give us some money so that we can keep the lights on. Good luck tonight, everybody. I will see you tomorrow. My pleasure.